Welcome to Teaching That Counts, a podcast dedicated to the teaching and learning of mathematics. I'm your host, Abel Maestas, and I love to talk about math education. Together with my amazing guests, we'll explore several topics in the world of math teaching and student learning. Whether it's building thinking classrooms, healing math trauma, building student and teacher math confidence, or creating more equitable math workspaces. If it's going to help students learn math and teachers teach math, then we'll talk about it. So if you're a teacher, a parent like me, admin, or a coach like me, I hope you find something that can inspire you and help build your practice listening to this podcast. You can always find us online at www.teachingthatcountspodcast.com. Yeah, I know that's long, but hey, that's the URL. You can find me on YouTube at Maestas Math or on socials at Maestas Teach. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Teaching That Counts podcast for Season 3. We're looking forward to this season. It's been awesome being able to share the last two seasons with you on building thinking classrooms and talking to wonderful guests last season. And I'm super excited for this season. We have some wonderful guests lined up. I believe, don't get too excited, but I do believe that I will have the return of Peter Liljedahl on here. He's got some updates for building thinking classrooms. So that'll be great to touch base with him again and see what's going on as we've been doing BTC for a couple of years now. Last time, in the very last episode of the season, I talked about that I was teaching summer school, and we're back from the summer. We're going to get ready to get the new school year started, and I had such a wonderful experience. And wonderful except for the 1 week I got COVID, so that that took a few days out from being in the classroom. But aside from that, I had a wonderful time being in the classroom with the students. I had one class for students that were moving from the college prep math series into either AP Pre-Calculus or the Accelerated Math 2. And we really focused in that class. I had a small group of students. We were up the whiteboards. We were focused on tasks, a focus on context, and problem solving, and really getting them ready for the type of rigor that they're going to see in those courses. So yeah, I did a little bit. I did some content, but the focus wasn't on content as much as it was on getting really prepared for the type of rigor they were going to see in AP Pre-Calculus and building their mathematical practice skills. That's what I felt was most important. I also had a group of students that were doing a credit recovery for Math 1, and that that was a great experience as well. It was about 16 students. I had a paraprofessional in there to help me with the multilingual learners, which were quite a few. I had quite a big ratio. It was about 10 multilingual learners to the whole 16 that I had in the class. So it was really great being able to be in there using all of the things I've learned about how to teach multilingual learners. And the one thing I can tell you, though, is that these students have been unsuccessful. All of these students were unsuccessful in math before. They were being asked to retake a class that they failed and do that right after finishing school, going right into summer school, and being in this class for 2 hours and 15 minutes a day for 14 days. Now, if you put yourself in that position, if you were asked to do something that, one, you didn't like, and two, you didn't feel like you were ever successful in, for about 2.5 hours a day, and you're being told that you can't move on or graduate or anything unless you do this, how motivated are you to do that? And not only just, you might be, I'm gonna really work hard. Some of us are like that, but for these students, it's building confidence that takes precedent over anything else. So as much as we worked on those skills that they didn't do well in that first semester of Math 1, we really worked on their numeracy and confidence. The only thing I felt didn't work well was that I only had 14 days and had missing some of those classes with, having been sick. I just didn't have the time to build a rapport that I really wanted to build with the students. I can say, though, towards the end of, I would say, the last week of summer school, I really, really started to see the students start to trust me, start to trust themselves in their math ability. I started to see the growth that they were seeing in themselves, but it was the very last week, and it took a while for me to kind of break through all those walls that they had built in themselves in terms of their self agency and self efficacy of mathematics. So I wish all those kids really well. I hope they continue on that journey of feeling confident, but I really wish I would have had some more time with them to really build that. So I really believe that those first 2 weeks in your school, if you're listening to this if you're a teacher and you're listening to this before you start your school, those first 2 weeks are so critical. And having been, one of the other things I got to do this summer was go to the Building Thinking Classrooms conference, and we got to present with a wonderful teacher in our district. And they really, really emphasize the importance of using those non-curricular tasks to build students, not only students thinking, but also to build the culture in the classroom that you want for the rest of the year, right? So don't skimp on those non-curricular tasks. Those first couple of weeks are so very, very important to establish the culture that you want to set in that. And if that means that you want to focus on really getting the students to understand what good group work looks like, what does it mean to communicate, what does it mean to problem solve, what does it mean to be working together on the vertical non-permanent surfaces, what is it, all of these things that we want our class to run smoothly with later on is really, really important in those first couple of weeks. But not only just the culture, but the idea that students can do it, right? Like, we have to believe students can do it, and they have to believe they can do it. But not only that, they have to believe that we believe that they can do it. that is the number one key to making sure all of this works, is that students believe that the teacher believes that they can do it. And they're pretty astute. If they think that the teacher doesn't believe in them, then they're not going to. There's no way that they're going to believe themselves. And that this is true with some of just the small things we do in class, right? If we do things like make groups, right? This is why random groups is so important. But if we make groups based on skill level, the kids know how they're doing in the class compared to some other kids. And if we intentionally put them with the smart, quote, smart kid, then they know that it's like, well, the teacher's putting me with them because I need help. There's no belief in me that I can do this, right? So it's just, that's one of the little things that could happen that implicitly tells students that we don't believe in them, in what they can be doing. So just one example, but overall, summer school was such a great experience. I loved being in the classroom with the students, and hopefully I'll do it again next year and not get COVID, so I can be in the classroom the whole time. So let's get on to this first episode of season 3. So season 2 kind of got cut short last season. We had a pretty intense end of the school year. So the last time I talked on the last episode, we had a teacher talk about her classes, and we were talking about the Central Math, the California Math Council Central Symposium, which we got to go to and present at that. This time I have a wonderful teacher on special assignment in our district. Her name is Melissa Marcucci, and she Last year, she was in charge of our college and career readiness. This year, she's doing half. She'll be in the classroom doing some tech work with our students at one of our schools. And then she'll also be continuing the work on getting our students college and career ready. And so what does that look like? I talked to her about what that looks like, what her job entails. How are we getting our kids college and career ready? And one of the things that we talk a little bit about is AVID. So if you're familiar with the AVID program and you're not, she'll talk a little bit about that. But we also talk about our experience at a CSU. CSU, for everyone out there, is California State University system. They put on a like 1-day workshop with some sessions on some of the things that they're hoping that they can see in math in high school, as well as how to get kids ready for college level math. So we talk about that. And by the way, if you're a high school math teacher, I really encourage you to listen to this episode and about what is actually happening at the CSUs, right? Or at the college level. There is a growing movement at the college level to start to understand that lecture-based classes are not the best for students, and even in retention and pass rate of their exams. So there is a movement going into a more student-based classroom, student-centered classroom, even at the college, as well as some changes in assessment types and grading. There's a lot of standards-based grading going on at the university. So I encourage you to take a listen. I hope that you enjoy this episode and hear some insights on how we can start to move our students forward into getting better prepared for college and career readiness, and really what that looks like. All right. Well, hope you enjoy this episode, and we will talk to you soon. So I'm here with Melissa Marcucci, and I am going to ask you to explain what you do, because you were in the class. We worked together at Ceres High School for a number of years, and you were the science teacher. You were teaching,
right.
I think, physics, right?
Mostly physics of the universe.
Physics. And then you came into a new position a couple of years ago at the district office, came on board as a teacher on special assignment, but it was special. It wasn't a coach. It was something different that the district wanted to do. So can you explain what you do and why it was important for this district?
So I am the A through G TOSA teacher on special assignment. So the state had a grant to help improve our A through G rates. And so we applied and we got that grant. And so they really needed somebody to be in charge of, well, what should we do? So it started with a lot of research and just reading into what are a lot of districts doing, pulling data for districts that are like us, and really starting to look at programs. How are they improving their students? And not just their A through G rates on the dashboard, which is our ultimate goal here, but opportunities for students to be A through G eligible, and how does that really not only set them up for their first year of college, but set them up to be career ready. So I've also been doing a lot of research into how do we provide greater opportunities for our students to really look at what they want to do for their careers and be able to experience that in their educational journey and experience it in a way that they don't feel like they're failing and they're in classes they don't want to be in, that they really have these goals. And so I've really been doing a lot of work, which it's a big umbrella. So the California Colleges Initiative is under my umbrella, really going through line by line every single course, making sure that we have accurate transcripts, whether they're manual entry and or just students who have been with us for a while, as well as we onboarded AVID, advancement via individual determination. So that's been a big undertaking to get that off the ground at several of our sites. And so just, again, providing those opportunities. We started a college and career family night, which we're going to continue. So
yeah, I remember that was the first one for our district, right?
It was the very first one. We got off the ground.
And it was successful. There was a lot of people there.
There was a lot of people, a lot of interest, and colleges were really excited. Businesses, local businesses were very excited. And so we're already putting together our next one for next fall. So it's really exciting.
You know, I heard somebody say that that kids are going to be thankful for all the work that you've done in the background, and they don't even know that you existed doing all that work for them in terms of A through G's and really getting the district aligned with what kids need to do to get to college. So let's talk instruction, and let's talk the connection with science. We've got a lot to talk about, by the way. So the new California math framework has been adopted.
Correct.
And there's a real focus on math practices. So I know that you have seen a connection between the NGSS standard, the science standards, and the math practice. There are standards in science that kind of connect to the math practice standards. What are those, and how do those connect?
Right. So the science and engineering practices, there are 8 of them in science, in the next generation science standards, which are nationwide standards, and California has chosen to adopt them. And really, they get deep into, asking questions, asking scientific questions. And how is that different than a probing question, right? Being able to analyze and interpret data, being able to use mathematical models, as well as many other models in science, right? There's a lot of deep connections. Being able to argue from evidence, so claim evidence reasoning, right? Being able to explain from the evidence, right? So here's why this concept works, and here's what's going on, and let me explain, but here's my evidence that supports it. And really getting kids deep into understanding how to play with numbers, looking at patterns, really analyzing system changes and energy flows, and all these big, really kind of out there concepts. We're just bringing it straight down and saying, here you go, here's a block of wood, what do you notice?
Yeah.
Right? And how does that really tell us something big about the world? And how does math really help us to understand the science? How does it help us to support the science and make the science relevant to us? And so we do a lot of work thinking about how math plays an integral role in that.
And that science is the curiosity part. The thing I love about science, and we talk about it in my house with my kids all the time, is just science is cool. Like, it is the coolest subject because it's made for curiosity.
Right.
And everyone is curious about something. What's the science behind soccer? And then how can mathematics and data support understanding that science? And I think that as we move forward towards a 21st century education, curiosity and problem solving and thinking about things have to be at the center of the way that we teach. Right. Now you got into about what students are doing in their classes to get them ready for college. Right. And we need to modernize our classrooms, right?
Right.
We have to stop thinking in no offense for older teachers that were taught in 1970s, but this is not the 1970s.
But no, and it's not even the 1970s. Like, what we've been doing in education, we've done for 100 years. Right? The whole bell system, come in, sit down, 50 minutes, take notes, learn, and then leave my classroom, right? Like, how are students, again, like you said, Abel, like, how do we capture an infant who is putting everything in their mouth because they're exploring the world, right? That kind of curiosity, the 2-year-old who keeps asking question after question. How do we keep and retain that curiosity when they enter school?
Yeah.
Because what we found is that we stifle it. Right? We completely break the natural human ability to be curious and ask these deep, meaningful questions about our world.
I think that's why my wife loves kinder, because they're just still so curious they just want to know everything about all the things. And even adults, I think, want to know stuff about things, but sometimes it narrows of what their curiosity and interests are in. So how do we bring that to our classrooms? So let's get to the meat of some of the things. We went to so CSU, for those listeners, stands for California State University System. And they had what did they call it? A summit?
It was a summit.
Yeah, a summit. And they had like 3 sessions and a opening speaker. Mm-hmm. Just provided us information on what students need to be able to do to be successful in math in in college, coming from high school. So they put on this summit. We both went, not knowing what we were getting into, right?
Thought we were just going to get some information on how to help our kids be A through G eligible.
Right. We saw the flyer and we're like, okay, this looks kind of cool. Let's go down to Fresno and see what's going on.
Why not?
So it turned out to be Awesome.
It was like a mini conference, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful, applicable breakout sessions. We couldn't even get to all of them.
Right.
And it was wonderful.
Right. So let's talk about what kids need to go into to be successful in college,
Right.
specifically math and science, because that's what we know. What were some big, like, let's just talk about the opening speaker. The keynote was Mark Ellis. He's a professor and chair of secondary education at CSU Fullerton. And he had some really fascinating things to say about what students need to know and what they should be doing. So one of the things I would say that really caught my attention was when he presented, they did a survey to math professors, and they asked them what do students entering college need to have in terms of their approaches, their attitudes, and perspectives coming in to be successful in math. And none of it was about factoring.
Right.
Right? None of it was about knowing algorithms.
Right.
It was all about what?
It was all about finding patterns,
Yeah.
right? Looking at the data, really, again, starting with almost that curiosity piece. I loved that, one example that tied to this idea of what students need with solving problems, looking at the unknown and figuring out real world is, the ASPCA. They come to you and they've got this claim, right, that within 18 months, a female cat could have 2,000 descendants, right? And they're trying to market this to you. And you're like, there's no way. That's not the correct math. Well, let's break it down, and you send kids into groups and, okay, look for patterns over time. Well, what do you need to know? And students are, I need to know this, I need to know that. Okay, great. So now here's the facts, the biological pieces you need, right? But now let's talk numbers. And all the groups are working on these different ways. And that's what I loved, is different ways to solve the same problem to come up with a result. And at the end of the day, the result was, that is true.
Yeah.
Right? But now, because I've grappled with it and I have how many different groups of students who have worked through the same problem in different ways and shown, well, here's what the pattern is, here's how we figured it out, and here's how we got to our claim, here's our evidence, right? Our own physical evidence, right? Separate of, I can go and look at all these published journals, but if I haven't seen the evidence myself, how do, and this is where we go back and forth between fact versus belief, right? How do I believe and really trust that science and math are real and that they're tangible? Well, because I just did it. And I just looked at this claim that there's just no way. And, well, lo and behold, the math is what helped me to understand, yes, this is actually true. So please spay and neuter your pets.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it is important for students to be able to deal with patterns and data. And one of the things he said, he said, a view that mathematics makes sense. Yes. Perceive mathematics as a way of understanding, not as a sequence of algorithms to be memorized. I'm just so tired of all this memorization of formulas and algorithms. We need students to be problem solvers and thinkers and communicators, right?
Right.
Ability to discuss and write coherently about mathematical ideas. And we're just talking about that, right?
Right.
They have to discuss the ideas, math and science, and be able to write about it.
Right.
Right? And we know that writing, and I mean, I guess I'm getting a little on a pedal, on like a, what do they call it? Soapbox, right?
Soapbox, yeah.
Writing in mathematics and in science, I believe I taught science for a little bit, is different than writing in your ELA class.
Correct.
Even though I think the ELA class can support the writing, it's different writing when you have a claim, the evidence, and the reason. And that's similar in mathematics, right?
Right.
We're trying to explain or justify our reasoning. It could come down to 2 sentences.
Right.
But it has to be about the math that you did, and it has to be a written justification of why that works.
Well, and I think students being able to take what are numbers and symbols and to turn those into expressive words, right? What does an equal sign really mean, right? What does zero really make? Zero is really important, right? In math and science, like zero is a number too, and this could be a significant result. So what does that mean? And I need you to explain that in words so that, and the other thing is for us as teachers, how do we know what a student's conceptual model in their brain is?
Right.
How do we know what they're thinking? How do we know what the misconceptions may or may not be? We need them to really produce this piece of writing, and then we can go through their argument together and say, oh, this is really great because, or you know what, your claim, it's on track, but your evidence doesn't really support your claim, right? Or maybe that justification piece.
Right. Yeah, we were just grading performance tests, and you can see there. One kid wrote a story about the driver's license stuff, and like, come on, kid, you just need to talk about the math real quick.
Right. Well, that's what we always say. No fluffy unicorns when you're doing technical writing.
Right.
Save that for your ELA class, right?
Yeah. So a couple other things that really stood out was the type of teaching that is American, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they say, well, maybe the tests should be changed, but the test is the same test across. They're using the NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, and that's the same same measure in all countries.
Right.
So how do we get kids there to be doing better? Well, one thing that they pointed out was that the time that we spend teaching concepts and making connections is, what did he say? It's about only 8% of the class period, where in other countries it's 40 to 37%, or even in some cases up to 50%.
Yeah.
In other countries, of the time spent in class are students making connections.
They're making sense
of stuff,
the data in
not
the world.
using procedures and
Right.
giving results. We have so much of focus in American math education on getting the answer and what was the procedure that you used.
Right. And what are the rules, basically, of the classroom? And these are the rules. You've got to show me every single step by step, as opposed to, well, there's a lot of organicness that happens, right? Same in science. We don't just go and do a formal lab and step-by-step procedure. Now we got data. Now we do. That's not the scientific method, right? The method is dead. It's this process of going back and forth and making observations and questioning your own work and going, is this really right? This doesn't make sense. The ballpark doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So let me go back. Let me talk to my colleague, my partner, right? And go, what did you get? How are you working through this problem, right? And at the end of the day, the kids are working through the problem because they already know the relevance.
Right.
They know the real world connection to what they're doing, because it's not, some guy with 57 watermelons in the back of his truck, right?
Yeah. Right. The classic math.
The classic math problem, right?
So we were there, and they talked about. So we're talking really about high school and K-12. That we want kids. They want kids to be talking. We want kids to be working together in collaborative groups, to thinking about problems before we just give them a procedure.
Right.
Have some curiosity. And be problem solvers and thinkers. But there's this myth, and I've taught high school. We taught high school for a long time. There's this myth that, if we do it that way, then students aren't going to be prepared for college, because in college they have to sit and take lecture notes for an hour, and that's the way. And then they have to take a test, and their grade is only based on like a couple of exams, and they're done.
Right.
That was true when I went to college, for the most part, but not all classes were like that. I was shocked at what I heard. I mean, not really shocked, but I was pleased at what I heard at this summit. So what are they doing in college right now?
So that's an interesting question.
Right.
So, and I'm going to back up a little bit, because we've been playing with building thinking classrooms, right?
Right,
That's kind of been the whole point of this podcast for the last
Right.
couple of years, and trying to, again, affect change at a larger level. How do we create a revolution, so to speak? And so what we heard straight from, and this summit was all Cal State professors in math, and they could also attest that this was also UC. They are working with UC professors, and we know that the revelation that happens in math, it's happening in science too, but they really said that they're deconstructing classrooms. They're using proficiency-based grades, right? So you don't have a curve set at 25% anymore.
Right.
They want to see learning. They've got students working in groups on whiteboards.
Yeah.
In fact, they said if there's no remedial classes in college anymore for the state of California. So what they do is all students go into a GE class, but they determine, do you need a GE class with support, so general education. And that support class, they're not sitting there and lecturing and going back over, here's how to do this.
Right.
They say on day one, okay, here's some problems. Get up there on your whiteboard in groups of 3 and work through the problems, and then share with each other how you figured this out, right? And the teacher will step in. A lot of times it's the TA, and you know, kind of guide or ask probing questions.
Right.
And that's really our challenge as teachers. How do we come up with the right questions to ask students to lead them down the correct path to solving it, but they're solving it themselves?
Right.
And that, I mean, it does require effort,
Yeah.
right? It requires a completely different way of thinking, but it is shaking up what problem solving looks like. And like you mentioned, Abel, this is not just the 21st century, right? We're a quarter of the way into it.
Right.
And the problems of our world are going to be so multidimensional, multidiscipline approaches. Students need to be thinking from the very beginning, right? How do I solve this problem? And how do I work with my colleagues to solve this problem? What other things do we need to know to solve this problem? And it's just this internal motivation to want to do it because, again, you've got that application. And they're doing that in colleges.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yay. I mean, we were just, fist pumping and we're so excited to hear that because we can now go back to our high schools and say, well, here's what the colleges are doing. Right? Yes, note-taking is an important skill. I'm not going to say it's not.
No, it is.
It's not.
I've never been against note-taking.
Right.
I'm for note-making.
Yes.
And that's a different skill.
Or sketchnoting or whatever. But you're going around, you're taking notes on what other groups have done to solve this problem. And you're looking at the different creativity.
Yeah.
And that's what just made me so excited is that we're in this world of like maker spaces and bringing back the arts, so it's STEAM, not STEM.
Right.
And where do we find the creative parts of math and science?
And that's one thing that they talked about was that math is creative.
Yes.
Right? If it can be done by AI, if you can learn it from a YouTube channel, then what's happening in the classroom that's different?
Right.
Because that's the reality that we're going into, right? Students can look up something on YouTube.
Right.
They can ask AI how to do something, but how does the experience that they're having in my classroom different than that experience that they can get out anywhere else?
Right.
And that's what I want to be. Howie Hua actually said that. It's, how do you make your class different than what they can experience someplace else? And that is going to tell you what should be happening in the classroom. Right. And it's happening at the university. I heard from multiple math professors, and one of them is the department head, and she said, I can attest to what's going on in my department and what's happening in other colleges because I go and I go visit other colleges. And she said, we're doing alternative assessments. We're not just giving tests anymore and quizzes. We're doing things like, I once thought this, but now I think that, and that's the assessment. One professor said, I don't do time tests. I don't believe in time tests.
Yes.
I do infographics and projects and different assessment types to really understand what the students are learning about. And I want them to learn. One professor said, we've taken all the regular desks out of the classrooms and put in tables with whiteboards, and students are up at whiteboards. Building thinking classrooms isn't just K-12.
Right.
We're hearing it. They're calling it something different. At the university, they're calling it active learning.
Active learning, correct.
But it's happening. Like if we are having kids sit in rows and listen to us talk,
right,
for 50 minutes and do problems, I do, we do, you do.
Right.
That is not preparing them for what their experience is going to be and should be in college. It's funny you talked about the support class. When I went to Cal Poly, 1993, we had something similar to that. We called it workshop. And so I would go to lecture, and then we would twice a week I'd go to what we called workshop, and there would be a student facilitator that the workshop program hired, and there would be a bunch of us that were in EOP. And if we were in EOP, it's because I was first gen in this program. And that's what it was. We would go in, and there was no whiteboards, just chalkboards, right?
Yeah.
So we would be in groups. Here is the workshop facilitator would have a bunch of problems that would scale from, easiest to more challenging. Now we call them mild, medium, spicy.
Right, right.
But we would go and we would let's go. And we would spend 2 hours working on problems on the chalkboard as the facilitator would come around and give us probing questions. Yes. And I think, and Cal Poly's motto was learn by doing.
Yes.
And I think that is what really inspired my own type of teaching. So when I wanted to go to vertical whiteboards, it wasn't because I read it in Peter's book. It was because I wanted students to have that feeling that I did in college, working in workshop, working in groups with problems on the board, and really getting a chance to think about that.
Right. And when you watch movies, right, that's what college looks like in movies.
Yeah, right.
You know, they've got the clear whiteboard and they're figuring things out and they got the background music, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, but that's the reality. And there's so many non-permanent surfaces, like walls are being constructed that way now. Yeah. There's a lot of learning labs that are being put in. I know Cal State Sacramento has their whole brand new science building has been built exactly that way. All of the study rooms have whiteboard walls. And whiteboard tables and everything. So you go in and it's all about solving and working through and this model and what's the model in your head versus what can you put out, you know, and talk about with your group. And so it just really is, again, our world is changing. And I want to also note that, you know, whatever is really good for students who are going into college also is preparing students to be career ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether or not they're going straight into college, or maybe some of our students are going straight into their career field, but being able to be a thinker, a problem solver, and being creative, inventive, right? Coming up with something new that nobody has ever thought of, whether it's a design or a technique or just a material, like I know there's something better for the earth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are the types of people we need to be producing in our schools.
Absolutely.
And so it's opening and exciting my eyes to the future, right? They say we've given this generation of kids all these problems. And it's like, but we're going to be giving them solutions, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be the problem solvers. They're going to be able to do things that we would have never been able to think of because we grew up in a very different world.
Yeah.
And those of us, I mean, I'm only a little bit younger than you, Abel, but I grew up and we had, you know, it wasn't until 4th grade that we got a home computer.
Yeah.
We had one TV in the house, a tube TV that sometimes worked, and we got this big, huge, bulky, and we'd have to, you know, each vie for our time on the computer, and it was a lot of DOS typing documents, and then the matrix printer, right? Like, just, you know, how has that changed to now everything I have on my cell phone or my tablet? Right? All of this information is at my fingertips, but if I don't know what to do with this information, right? Maybe I am watching a movie and I want to look something up. How do I know that that's accurate, right? And so again, being able to think critically about our world and figuring out where math plays a huge role, spatial awareness. You know, I've got a teenager at home, and I know you do too, right? When she shoves more clothes than can actually fit into the washer and is shoving them down, like trying to understand, they're not going to get cleaned. You need to have space. Also, the dryer is smaller than the washer, and, right? So this is why you're taking 3 hours and almost burning my dryer down, right? Like, so it's just like spatial awareness and problems. I'm thinking through, you know what, maybe I should do 2 loads.
Yeah.
Right? So these, and we know that that's just a teenager, but also that's the idea, right? Is that they're able like to have done that math problem in school.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's what colleges are doing.
Volume.
And it's just, well, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. So I learned so much from this little tiny summit. It's inspiring to know what is out there for our kids when they get to college, if they decide to go to college. But our conversation today was really around our kids, getting our students prepared for college, what they need to be able to do. And thank you for joining me. I really appreciate all the work that you've done. I know you're going back to the classroom halftime, I think it is, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to do a little split position.
Right. So the students at the school that you're going to are so lucky to have you. You're doing technology, is that right?
Yeah, so it's basically a tech position, and so of course that means I get to play with, AI and computer science and 3D printing.
Nice.
And we're going to wrap some college and career modules into there, exploration, right? But so anything that is moving them, it's not typing, right? We need to move away from the model that technology means I'm going to learn how to type, right? Which granted, yes, they need to learn how to do, but really moving them into everything is automated now. Your washing machine needs to be programmed. Your dishwasher needs to be programmed. What happens when that breaks down?
Right.
Can you fix it, or do you have to call somebody, a repairman that costs $500 every time they come out, right? So that's the idea, is that our students are able to navigate this world of all programmable types of things in their house, let alone everything's automated in industry and ag and all of these fields, right? So how are you going to be the one that fixes that? Because that's what we need. Baristas are being replaced at the Modesto Mall with robots.
Wow.
Right? So, but somebody's going to have to fix the robot.
Yeah.
And we love the robot because it's quality control.
Right.
But how do you bring that human creative aspect into it? We have to stay ahead of the curve, and we have to make sure that our students are provided those opportunities.
Yeah. The jobs of today aren't going to necessarily be the jobs of tomorrow.
No, and we cannot even predict what that's going to look like. So we just have to do the best we can to at least set our students up for success.
Yes,
with
absolutely.
these math practices and these science practices, right? And the knowledge pieces come when you do the practice. The practice is really the vehicle for learning now, which it should have always been, but education cycles around.
Right, but definitely is now.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Melissa, for joining me. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and have a good day.
Great, thanks so much, Abel.